Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our Q&A part 2 for December 2023. We're going to be talking about all the great GPU questions we didn't answer last time, including where GPU prices are going, NVIDIA versus AMD, DLSS versus FSR, and of course, we'll talk about what's coming next for PC building in 2024. Remember, if you get value out of this video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, and of course, subscribe, click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Hey, with that, let's jump into it. Before that, this video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows 10 licenses and that terrible Activate Windows 10 watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key, and get a Windows 10 Home or Pro OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom, you have a fully licensed Windows 10 for a crazy low price, which can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. Use the links in the video description below. Let's jump into those GPU questions. Remember, last time we got so many good GPU questions, we cut our Q&A in half. The other Q&A that we already put on the channel, I'll leave a link to it down in the video description, and I'll link it at the end of the video. You can just click right into it. You don't need to watch that one first to watch this video, but we talked about the GPU market as a whole. What about the RTX 4000 Super Series coming, specs, performance, pricing, and what impact do we expect on the market? In this video, I mostly want to talk about AMD versus NVIDIA versus Intel, the feature sets, DLSS versus FSR versus XeSS, all those crazy questions. Do they even matter, or are we blowing them completely out of proportion? Let's start off with Fantastic asks, 7900 XTX or RTX 4080. What's the difference in DLSS and FSR? Okay, let's set the 7900 XTX and 4080 question aside for just a moment. Obviously, we got the 4080 Super. It's going to depend on the pricing and the performance of that card, though we don't expect that much of an uplift over the 4080 because while, like, for instance, the 4070 Super, they're actually going to take a 4070 Ti die and they're going to drop it down into the 4070, so there's going to be a bigger performance boost there. And same with the RTX 4080 die, they're going to drop one of those dies down into the RTX 4070 Ti Super. What a crazy name for a GPU. And they're going to give it 16 gigs of VRAM. For the 4080, they're not going to drop a 4090 die down because they can't even make enough 4090 dies right now. They're selling like hotcakes. There's no reason for them to come up with a discounted version of it, basically. They're going to already do that for China to have the 4090 Dragon version so they can sell that into China and avoid the US export requirements out there. But they are going to do a slightly better bin version of the 4080. That's going to become the 4080 Super. We're expecting about 9%, 10% possibly better performance. It's good. They're probably going to jack a lot more power into it. Going to soup it up a little bit, and it's all going to depend on where the pricing is. For my money, I still like the 7900 XTX. I still think that architecture is going to age better. I also think that if you look at RDNA 3 versus RTX 4000 series, as you go up in resolution, the 7000 series does better than the 4000 NVIDIA series. That's actually the opposite we saw of the 3000 NVIDIA series versus the 6000 series. It was the other way around last generation, that as you went up from 1080p to 1440p to 4K, the NVIDIA GPUs just did better and the gap between them started to grow. This is completely flipped on its head for RTX 4000 versus RX 7000 series GPUs. But let's answer the meat of the question here. DLSS versus FSR. Let's throw in XeSS, which is Intel's upscaler as well. First of all, what are upscalers? Basically, let's say you're playing a game at 4K, your GPU is struggling to render enough frames. So what this does is rather than render the frames at 4K on your GPU, it renders at a lower resolution, like 1440p, for instance, and then it uses a solution, a software solution or a hardware solution to upscale that to 4K so that you can get a relatively similar frame rate at 4K that you would at 1440p. Not exactly, but you get the basic idea. And DLSS uses actual hardware on the GPU, on the NVIDIA GPU. That's why you can only use DLSS with an NVIDIA GPU. Meanwhile, FSR, XeSS are basically open source. They're software solutions, so you can use those with any GPU, even an NVIDIA GPU. There's different versions out there. Some have implemented FSR 2, FSR 1, the FSR 2.2, that you get the idea. So the implementation itself is a little bit patchwork right now, though I will say it's getting better. These technologies largely worthless, however, at 1080p, largely worthless at 1440p, well, marginally useful probably at 1440p. Their real value is at 4K, and their real value is either where you got ray tracing turned on and you're not quite getting enough FPS to kind of make it over the hump, and you need DLSS or FSR in order to kind of get you to something that feels more either playable or more playable, kind of tips you into a higher refresh rate experience from like 60 FPS, or you're playing with a GPU, say like at 4K, that probably shouldn't be playing at 4K to begin with. And in order to render it, you should turn on DLSS or FSR. Now, there is some utility if you already have a GPU and you're gaming at 4K, say you have like a 7900 XT, yeah, you can turn on FSR, or if you have like a 4070 Ti, you can turn on, and you're not running out of VRAM for whatever reason, you can turn on DLSS and you can get more frames than you normally would. If you look at the use case, it pretty much chops out most GPUs. Anything below a 7800 XT really has no business turning that on most of the time. Although, look, in some titles, it'll give you a small bump. So why not take a free small bump? Of course. But I see people all the time when they're looking for a GPU, they're like, oh, I need an NVIDIA GPU, so I'm going to get the 3060 12 gigabyte for $289 instead of the 6700 XT 12 gigabyte for $10 more. And you ask yourself, why are you doing this? You say, oh, I have to have DLSS. And you're like, do you realize the 6700 XT is 50% more powerful than the 3060? That's where I think people just kind of lose their minds over this, especially given the fact that they're probably going to end up playing a lot of games at 1080p with that 3060. Whereas if you bought a 6700 XT instead, you'd be playing most games at 1440p at good frame rates. So really, if you look at the testing that gets done of DLSS, FSR, XeSS, it occurs at 4K because that's where these technologies actually have some utility with GPUs that struggle to run at 4K. But what do you need to play at 4K? You need a 4K gaming monitor, and you probably need a 4K high refresh rate monitor. So you probably already spent $500-ish on your gaming monitor rather than like relatively high refresh rate 1440p monitor you can get for $180. And you could have pumped that money into your GPU instead. So there's a lot of things that are required in order to get value out of DLSS, out of FSR, out of XeSS, at kind of the scale that I think would influence my graphics card buying decision. I'm not saying that there's no value ever. I'm just saying when I'm looking to buy a GPU, I'm looking for raw horsepower here because of the fact that the use cases on these are relatively narrow. And that's what their greatest benefit occurs in these narrow use cases. So I would really, really focus in on raw horsepower on your GPU. Don't shortchange yourself chasing a technology that's not really going to help you. We continue to get a lot of questions about the best 1440p GPU, RAFG, and we've got Stash Boy basically saying 7800 XT versus the 4070, or should they wait for the 4070 Super? Honestly, I would say no matter what, I would wait for the 4070 Super. Just see what they're going to announce. I mean, it's only another week. I don't think, in fact, the 7800 XT pricing had kind of peaked around $550. It was crazy, $550 during the holiday period, but now that it's after Christmas, I'm filming this one after Christmas, the prices seem to be trending back down towards the MSRP. So I think that's good. And it always gives AMD an opportunity once NVIDIA does their announcement to announce the next day that they're going to do price cuts on the 7800 XT. So I would just stand pat, but let's talk about the performance of the three GPUs. Although I do believe it's going to largely be determined by pricing. Again, we talked in our last video about where does NVIDIA want to go with the 4070 Super. I still think 12 versus 16 gigs is kind of a selling point. It's not necessarily for now, but maybe 2 years from now, I could see 12 gigs starting to run out. You can already see it running out when you have ultra details set at a higher resolution and you turn on ray tracing, and the 4070 struggles with some VRAMs in some particular titles. Now, I don't think that makes the 4070 unusable for 1440p. I mean, just don't do ray tracing in those titles, or go from ultra to high details instead, and you won't run out of VRAM. But I think it's a harbinger of where we're going in terms of VRAM usage. I kind of feel like with the 8 gigabyte thing kind of blowing open, the dam's broken open at this point. I think developers are going to see this as a green light to use more and more VRAM, especially as we're going to get next gen consoles, 2026, and they're definitely going to probably have quite a bit more VRAM than we have right now. So I just don't expect 12 gigs to hold forever out there. I still like 16 gigs on this, even if the 4070 Super comes in a little bit faster. That being said, let's see where pricing comes in. Check out our previous Q&A for more in depth on that. But right now, I would definitely call a timeout and wait and see. All right, Kirby Louise, great question. What's the future PC building in 2024? He says, as we close out 2023, what are my thoughts? What are the major and minor changes in 2024 and beyond? What's going to be the next big trend? Well, as I look at it, we have been in a golden age of PC building. And this is what I said, even during the GPU shortage, that once the GPU shortage ended, because Ethereum went to proof of stake and crypto mining died with GPUs, that we would enter this golden era. And we have, and largely also because AMD and NVIDIA, despite the fact that I was screaming it from the rooftops, clearly weren't listening to me, and they massively produced GPUs in the RTX 3000 and 6000 series respectively. And we've been using those good value GPUs to kind of power this generation of PC building, where, for instance, check out our December best builds, $750 for a 1440p capable gaming PC, brand new, very, very capable if you want to do video editing or anything else. I mean, I compare that to what the very first build we did on the channel in 2019, where for $800 and something, and remember, inflation's a thing. That $800 today would be more like $1,000. Would only get us to 1080p because it had a 1660 Super in it. So just look at the insane value that we're getting right now. I think it's unparalleled, absolutely unparalleled. But is that going to last into next year? I think yes, as long as we have cheaper GPUs and cheaper CPUs to rely on, then we're going to be able to build really, really great gaming PCs. I think the 7800X 3D has bode really well because it's pulled the price of the highest end CPUs for gaming down from this like $500-600 range down to about $350. And they'll probably keep tilting down a little bit around $350. Who knows? Maybe Intel will finally cut prices to a level that will actually allow them to be competitive in DIY PC. They're getting creamed right now. If you look at any of the sales data, they're getting absolutely stomped by AMD. It's not even close. It's almost like it used to be with NVIDIA and AMD in the GPU market. That's what it is right now with AMD and Intel in the CPU market. Meanwhile, AMD has really made a comeback with the 7000 series, especially the 7800 XT. Maybe it was just a matter of them not having high-end GPUs and finally developing one, and it took to the 7000 series to really cement in people's minds that they are a more premium solution again. So we're seeing that balance out as well. I think GPU prices, we're going to see a price war. I think that that's super exciting for me. I am a little disappointed that AMD canceled their high-end RDNA 4 series because they can't get the multi-chip module working, supposedly. So we'll have to wait and see. And of course, we were expecting the RTX 5000 series GPUs to launch in 2024, but now NVIDIA's dropping hints that might not happen because they might not feel like they have to do it, and they want to produce AI GPUs on the Hopper architecture rather than shifting everything to Blackwell. So we'll see. We'll see how that all goes. If you're like, Jason, oh, did I miss the boat? Did I miss the best value? You might have missed the absolute peak of the mountain, but we're still on, I feel like we're on the Mount Everest right now of value. So we just got so much value. So even getting slightly less value in 2024, it's still going to be historically good PC building value. So I'm really bullish on PC building. I think they're going to really start crushing the consoles. The console's now 3-4 years old. That's why, Sony's looking at a refresh of the PS5 Pro out there. They're starting to struggle to run some of these newer games, especially at 4K, even with upscaling. You're targeting like 20 to 30 FPS. It's starting to feel like an old console again if you're playing at 4K out there on some of these consoles. And I think people are like, well, this doesn't feel like a gaming experience that I've come to expect. That's where PC gaming comes in. So I think value is going to continue. Cases have gotten better. They've gotten cheaper. PSUs have gotten better. They've gotten cheaper. SSDs, I think, will continue to remain affordable, though the price is going to go up a little bit. Same with RAM. Affordable, though it will tick up a little bit. And I just see great things in terms of CPUs and possibly even GPUs out there to keep that value really, really solid for 2024. Let's talk about bottlenecks. This is always one of my favorite things to talk with folks about because I think it's so misunderstood. Got Lieva logs. Totally mispronounced that. I apologize. How can we make sure we have the right combination of hardware when it comes to bottlenecks in either the CPU or the GPU? Well, actually, I will say we do a video every year, which is the best CPU GPU combo, where we go through this in some detail. So I'm gonna leave that link down in the video description, and I'm gonna urge you to check that out. We go through what makes a CPU and a GPU bottleneck. Basically, we always want our GPU when we're gaming to be our bottleneck. We always want that to be the thing where we're maximizing the performance of it. We never want to have a situation where the CPU is binding our GPU, except sometimes, given like the dollar gap, right? Given that this GPU costs $250 more than that GPU, or this CPU only costs $30 more than that CPU, sometimes it makes sense to up our GPU with the same amount of money because we're going to get more frames even if we introduce a slight CPU bottleneck. So let me give you an example. $1,000 price point has been really, really tough to hit. And it's just been this kind of gray area between Ryzen 5000, Intel 12th gen, and then on the other side, Intel 13th or 14th gen, LOL, or Ryzen 7000, which are higher performing CPUs. And the difference is the GPUs that you're using. Right now, like for instance, a Ryzen 5600 will get almost all the frames that you need out of anything like an RX 6800 or below. And introducing a CPU like a 7600, which is faster, but a lot more expensive, like $150, $200 more in the overall build, the difference you get there is not as significant as just sticking with that 5600 and spend that $150 and just pumping your GPU up, especially when in the future you can always drop in a 5800 X3D or who knows, 5700 X3D, we'll see where that shakes out. So that's our CPU GPU combo. We go through specific recommendations kind of at every budget level. We talk about when it makes sense to upgrade your CPU and upgrade your GPU, but that's it in a nutshell. Basically, we're always just trying to get the most FPS we can for our money and not really as focused on the bottlenecks, but there are some kind of general rules of thumb that will help us get there. Here's another question I feel like we see all the time on the channel. I just want to take an opportunity to answer it, which is, should you get just the cheapest version of that GPU or should you spring an extra $50 or $100 or more sometimes to get a more expensive version? That's what Release the Kitties. I love the name, by the way, Release the Kitties. Hey Jason, why does a Power Color Red Devil GPU cost more than stuff like the XFX Merc, for instance? Is it like a name brand versus off-brand kind of things? Not really, although I will say some brands like ASUS, for instance, typically will charge a premium for like their Strix GPUs. A lot of it has to do with the aesthetics of the GPU. So there's a couple of different reasons to buy. For instance, let's take an RTX 4070. Right, 12 gigabyte GPU. If you just want like the base version, you can get like the MSI Ventus version or like a Zotac version, typically for $530, $550 right now, somewhere in that range. Or you could spring a lot of money for that ASUS Strix. Now the ASUS Strix version might cost $100, $150 more, comes with a beefier cooler, it looks cooler, comes maybe RGB. Maybe you get an all-white version and you're into the aesthetics of it. That's really the reason to get it. I will say, typically GPUs under the highest end GPUs, not a lot of difference between them. Not a lot of difference between them. Although I will say the 7800 XT, for instance, we have the Gigabyte Gaming OC one, actually it's sitting right here. Not testing by us, testing by tech testers, found that this was actually, if you wanted to go ahead and overclock this GPU, because the cooler on it is super, super heavy duty, you could actually get the best performance out of this card, and it's at the MSRP. It was, well, at least it was at $499. I saw it creep up over Christmas, and hopefully it'll kind of trickle back down now that the Christmas shortage is over. That's an example where there was a difference between like one version of the 7800 XT and maybe like the reference version. It was like a 9% difference. I think they found at 1440p. That's not an insignificant difference if you only want to spend a little bit of time overclocking your GPU, especially given that the Radeon software makes overclocking your GPU way, way less complicated than it used to be. Hey, let me know, by the way, would you like to see a GPU overclocking guide first? Let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd like to see in the future. But of course, the GPUs where this probably matters the most is like the highest end. So the highest end 4090s, yeah, if you go to like the liquid cooled solutions and you want to spend a lot more money, you can eke out more performance out of those. You're going to pay through the nose for them, but there's not really an option to go up to the next GPU tier. Whereas kind of more in the middle, it usually makes more sense if you're going to end up spending more on your GPU just to go from a 4070 to a 4070 Ti, or from a 4070 maybe to a 7900 XT if you don't mind switching brands, something like that instead, rather than just getting a more expensive version of that base card. All right, Call Me Terror and says, can you tell us some of your plans for YouTube in 2024, or is it a surprise? It's not really a surprise. In fact, we recently polled folks in terms of what more kind of stuff you'd like to see on the channel. The good news is, me personally, I'm no longer in grad school. I was actually in grad school and I was previously working another full-time job while doing this. I'm now completely dedicated to the YouTube channel, which 2 thumbs up there, and of course to the film stuff that we do with my wife. So we have big plans for 2024, but we're just not exactly sure how they're gonna shake out. A couple things that I would love to do, and let me know down in the comments what kind of stuff that you would like to see. I'd like to expand the number of guides we do. I'd love to, for instance, do like a gaming mouse buying guide, a gaming keyboard buying guide, maybe like an audio buying guide. I'd also like to do more maybe GPU overclocking guides, kind of some more advanced after you build guides. So, we do everything right up to you build and set up, but I'd like to go a little bit beyond that. So again, let me know down in the comments. We could, talk about what games are coming every month for PC, what kind of hardware requirements you're going to need. Should you be upgrading your GPU? So let me know what kind of stuff you'd love to see in the future. Of course, we're going to continue to put out the same content we put out. We're going to put out great guides for, how to build a PC, how to set up your PC, build guides based on, like Ryzen 8600 whenever that comes, Ryzen 8800 X3D, the next generation of Intel as well. We're going to continue to do all of that, as well as our regular market watch reports on GPU prices. And of course, we're going to continue to do Boost My Build and this Q&A series, but we'd love to spice it up a little bit. So let me know what you'd like to see. I also just wanted to take a second and say thank you to everybody. We are just about to hit 400,000 subscribers. I don't know if this video is going to be out before 400,000 or just slightly after it, but either way, it's monumental. We're super excited about that. So remember, if you got value out of this video, give it a like. You know the deal, right? Give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe. Become one of our 400,000 plus subscribers out there. It's been a wild ride. Remember, we have part 1 of the Q&A where we go through the entire GPU market. What do we expect in 2024 in terms of pricing, availability, launches, etc. Right here. Check it out, and we'll catch you on the next one.